thank you everybody for showing up for this panel. This is a Dark Helix Press and SMOL Press Book Fair's Asian Speculative Readings panel. And this panel, we're going to feature a few authors who will read their stories featured in the book Immersion. It's an anthology of Asian speculative fiction, or the Dark Helix Ezine, which is a free magazine on the Dark Helix Press website. And each author will be reading for 10 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A after. So the authors reading tonight includes Vincent Ternida, Carlo Javier, Melissa Yuan-Innes and Lily Chang. And I'm your host, JF Garrard, and I'm the president of Dark Helix Press. So welcome everybody, and thank you for taking the time out to join us tonight. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce Vincent. So emerging author Vincent Ternida's pieces have appeared in Rice Paper Magazine, Dark Helix Press, and he was also longlisted for CBC Short Story Prize in 2019. Ternida's first novella, The Seven Muses of Harry Salcedo, was published by Asian Canadian Writers Workshop and Dark Helix Press. I'm actually publishing a second edition. He currently has an anthology of short stories in development, and he lives in Vancouver, British Columbia. So I'm going to mute myself, and when your 10 minutes is up, I will just start waving at you frantically or something, okay?
Okay. All right, I'm live, right? So yeah, the story that I submitted for Immersion is called Not All Bears Drink Mead. You can add a hashtag if you want, for the Not All Bears, you know. Yeah, well, the part that I'm going to read is the speculative part, because most of it really occurs inside my characters' heads, but this one is really real, presumably. Okay. Adam licked his jam-smeared paws, coated with mashed blackberries collected from the field. He knew it was a risk to step out in the open since the wood was human territory, but he could not resist the forbidden fruit. He needed another hour to spend in this form so he could function properly as a human for the rest of the week. All that mattered was he indulged in his suppressed bestial instincts. Gunshots. There were 3 and then a click. Hunters? Impossible. It was against the law to hunt bear in this province. Most likely city slickers letting off steam. It sounded like a rifle. Adam was now full of feather. He lingered in the grass, attempting to get a clear view of the aggressors. His instincts told him to pounce, but his human psyche still had a modicum of control. Climbing towards higher ground, Adam was now in full sight. He knew the risk, but he played the bluff with the hunters. His life against a hefty fine, suspension of gun licenses, and probably some prison time for the humans. They spoke of racial conflicts in the human world, but that paled in comparison to humans abusing their position at the top of the food chain. One of the hunters screamed at the bear and made himself appear larger. Adam found him funny. The boy aimed the rifle at Adam and pretending to fire, but the rifle misfired and the powerful recoil curved the butt of the rifle from his shoulder to his forehead. He dropped to the ground with a wound to his head. The other hunters began to panic as they tried to stabilize him. Adam lumbered away. He would use the last hour for a small nap before reconvening with his Craigslist shaman. That's it.
That's it. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Vincent. That was only 2 minutes. Do you want to read more?
Any more, and you won't be able to sell the book. I can read the whole thing.
Oh my gosh. All right. Okay, Melissa is next. So Melissa Yuan-Innes is a Writers of the Future award-winning writer of fantasy and science fiction, and under the name Melissa Yee, a Derringer and Arthur Ellis Award finalist, and she's the author of Medical Mysteries. She is also an emergency physician with 1 husband, 2 small children, and 1 rescue Rottweiler. Say hi to Melissa on Facebook and at Dr_Sassy on Twitter, or sign up for a free book at her website, www.melissayuaninnes.com. So Melissa, I will let you take it away. I hope, is your friend here? I know you had someone coming to watch you.
Oh, she didn't feel well, but I actually was just quickly answering another friend who said she was interested in coming, but do I have to turn on my camera? And I assured her she did not.
Recording
so someone may pop on later.
I'll send you the link later to send to your friend that's sick, okay?
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay.
So I'm Melissa Yuan-Innes, and I'm going to read you a story from futuristic Canada called Space and Time Books. Space and Time Books awoke at dawn. This August morning had the gray blue sky of a Turner painting. Though the bookstore had never strayed from Montreal's Sherbrooke Street, it knew about Turner paintings through diffusion. Since books constantly whispered their words aloud, they were soaked up by the store's shelves, windows, and walls, and became a part of it. The books paused only when John Swee, the owner, came in and began measuring out the coffee. The rich smell of coffee, the store thought, was worth 1,000 words. John poured over the accounts, shaking his head. The bookstore took no notice, as John always grunted before his first coffee. Nathalie came in and shook the rain from her umbrella. Hello, love. What's the damage? Worse than I thought. He pressed her hand to his cheek. Her burgundy nail polish harmonized with the oak bookshelves. The bookstore hummed. He liked harmony. John shook his head. I can't do this anymore. It's not fair to you. She laughed. To me? You can't throw your money away on my store. She linked her hand with his. I will throw it where I like. On your store, on supporting you as you write your novel, and on au pain de chocolat. Nat, this is not a joke. She stopped smiling. Neither is this, he snorted. Space and Time Books. The bookstore stopped humming. Will we still have our Halloween party? Natalie asked. He sighed. I guess I have to sell off the stock. The door's bells rang. It was a girl with black hair and a box load of books. Hi, Maggie. I'm not taking anything right now. Oh, come on. She dumped a wet box on the counter. Nathalie? Well, we have Anne Rice. What's this? The Basic Book of Spells. Nathalie lifted out a book with a black leather cover. It was warm and she recoiled. Cool, eh? No thanks. She looked at John. Sorry, Maggie. All right, I'll look around. Maggie came back with a Bruno and Boots book. How much? $2. She stuck her tongue out. Can I trade for the Book of Spells? John shook his head and showed her a Halloween party notice. Want to come? Yeah, maybe. See ya. She dashed into the rain with her book. Nathalie brought out the coffee. They clinked their mugs and kissed, but then the bells rang again. Hopeless to get any action here, John said, standing. Nathalie noticed the spell book on the table and with a grimace, dropped it in the back room. The bookstore was perturbed. Finally, a decent owner, books with good vibrations, and now this. Money, the root of all evil. The store decided to round up some business tomes. They straightened their covers importantly and declared that independent bookstores were closing their doors. Big bookstores were getting bigger discounts, buying up first print runs and returning them, and generally not playing fair. The Basic Book of Spells lay silent. Look at that, a tax book whispered, its spine shuddering. Someone has to invoke her. The bookstore called. With the power invested in me by the books I hold, I invoke you. She creaked open. What do you want, Space and Time Books? Dust billowed out with each word. The bookstore hesitated. Money. There will be a price. First, you must think of the solution yourself. Second, you may only invoke me 3 times. And third, you will pay me. Done. The next morning, John drank coffee and fought writer's block on his novel about robots. A nickel rolled inside the door. He handed it back to a little girl. She sniffled in thanks. A guy bought a postcard and forgot his wallet. John sighed and left a message on his answering machine. An elderly lady crept in. Hi, Mrs. McGarrigle, she whispered. I won the lottery, John. You can smell alcohol. Congratulations. What will you do with it? Her face crinkled. I'm not sure. He put an arm around her. Her voice was small. May I use your bathroom? Of course. John found a crumpled lottery ticket on the toilet tank. He put it in an envelope for Mrs. McGarrigle. It's not working. That's not my fault. The Book of Spells ruffled her pages. I mean, he's too honest to take other people's money. Money has to come from somewhere. It doesn't grow on trees. I know. The books, I couldn't remember which book had said that. How about making me attractive to people so there'll be lots of customers? She snorted. I guess I could try a love spell. I've never done it on a building before. Your store is beautiful, gushed a woman. I love the oak shelves. Her husband gestured with his cane. The LED lights are economical, yet easy on the eyes. Can I help you? John asked them. No, she turned to her husband. Look, sweetheart, stairs. You know what that means. They chorused. A second floor. John interrupted. It's not open to the public. A tear rolled down the woman's cheek. John sighed and took them on a tour. The woman dropped her diamond ring and the man lost his toupee. Then some kids burst in. Way cool, no way. Yeah, he's got all the comics in print. How much have you got? They dropped all their change on the floor. The dimes rolled everywhere. Hey, sorry, man. John sighed. He's not selling books, he's giving tours. The Book of Spells cover curled scornfully. You got what you wanted. I did, I'm sorry. It's just that people are trumping in and losing their wallets. The second spell doesn't negate the first. So now I have to make everything right in a third spell with people dropping money and drooling all over me? The Book of Spells peeled through her pages like a deck of cards. Got any ideas? John awoke and headed to the computer like a man possessed. Natalie croaked, John? Sorry to bother you, hon. Go back to sleep. She pulled the blanket over her face. It's okay. I'm glad you're writing your novel again. It's not my novel. He wrote until dawn. A month later, Natalie was decorating Space and Time books for the Halloween party with streamers and spiders in the windows and a sign that read, Halloween book launch, Me and Space and Time, the autobiography of John Sweet. John had blazed her the manuscript and a print-on-demand service bought it. Now people swarmed in to buy, sipping cider as they waited. John signed so many books that his hand cramped. Later, Natalie muttered, it's the Bermuda Triangle of Montreal, as she organized all of the lost jewelry and wallets. John made a note of that for his book. They grinned and touched hands. The bookstore was uncomfortable from all the body heat and the spilled cider. Oh, quit belly aching, said the basic Book of Spells. I never expected to be this popular. Should have thought of better spells then. She blew out a cloud of dust. You've had your 3. Now it's my turn. The store's stairs creaked anxiously. What is it? I thought people were bad enough, but now I'm being used by a building. What's next? Bacteria wanting to help taking over the world? What do you want me to do? Hide me forever. She slammed her cover shut. Why don't you cast an the bookstore said, why don't you cast an invisibility spell on yourself? Are you trying to worm your way out of payment? She lulled open. Because I know some good curses. The store grabbed her and hid her under some cookbooks. Space and Time books awoke at dawn. It was December now, with snow and lights on its roof. A street cleaner paused to look at the window longingly. The bookstore touched the Book of Spells, which pulsed, warm and silent and hidden. The store brushed its uneasiness aside and waited for John to come and brew some more coffee. The end.
Thank you very much, Melissa. That's a lovely story. Okay, so next we have Carlo. So Carlo Javier is a writer, web developer, and communication specialist based in Vancouver, Canada. And he likes to write about issues surrounding the Filipino diaspora, social media, and relationships. And he's going to read Janitor, which is his first published fiction piece, and it's featured in Immersion anthology. So thank you, Carlos.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming. I'm just gonna read from the beginning, and I'll read the whole 10 minutes maybe. It's been some time since I last played basketball, and even longer since I last went to the gym. So I knew that moving the dead body of a full-grown man was going to be a challenge. The man laid in a pool of his own blood in the living room of a luxurious penthouse apartment just blocks away from Vancouver, Canada's Skull Harbor. He wore a tailored navy pinstripe suit with cufflinks that probably cost as much as a week's salary from my day job. His gold watch glimmered noticeably in the dimly lit room, like a lonely star in the vast night sky. It was an Audemars, which is as much a status symbol as it is a timepiece. The place had tall ceilings, large windows, and a panoramic view of the water. Everything looked expensive, and even his fridge had a screen on it. I was sure the apartment would fetch a nice price tag on the market, despite having someone murdered right by its gas fireplace. What I wasn't sure about was the body. Someone from the underground usually gave us at least a 48-hour notice for cleanups like these, but they never tell us who these people are and why they're killed. I've always wanted to know these things. Some context would be nice. The dead man had several stab wounds, including one right in the center of his throat. Lorna, my boss, said that she didn't see any signs of a struggle and that the assassin was probably quite good at their job. Everything had already been disconnected, including any form of internet connection, cameras, and any other security measure that could compromise the assassin or us. She also said that the assassin might have had a sadistic side, stabbing the man a couple of times before landing the killing blow to his throat. They didn't need to be so messy, Joy said as she finished stitching up the first of several deep incisions on the man's gut. Yeah, well, work is work, Lorna said. Joy kept closing the wounds while we cleaned the crime scene. I used to think that stitching up the cuts and stabs was pretty pointless, but soon learned that leaving them unattended could lead to a worse mess for us. These days, I tend to just keep my mouth shut and focus on the work. Cleaning can be a bit of a pain, you see. And it's not like you're cleaning a messy bathroom either. Getting rid of all the blood is tough to do and tougher to stomach. But sometimes the assassin struggles and ends up in a fight. That usually results in more of a mess. For the most part, we threw away broken things and returned misplaced items to their most logical places. Once we tried to bring new picture frames to replace shattered ones, but we quickly realized we weren't getting paid enough to go through the trouble. Although cleaners are welcome to take the target's belongings, and some have gotten rich by being smart scavengers, Lorna doesn't let us. She likes to say that we're not thieves and that taking from the dead will bring bad omens. This is gonna take a little longer. You guys mind getting us some coffee? Just a 20 in my jacket, Joy said. Oh, I got it out there. I think I have some coffee cards anyway, Steve said. Steve and I took the maintenance elevator down to the main lobby. The elevator was smaller than we expected, and I was worried that our makeshift gurney might not even fit. Taking the body down the stairs would be tough, even though Steve was a strong 5'9", 200-something pounder who worked at Gordon Food Service for 2 years. I figured it would also be bad for my back. Steve's car was parked beside a getaway van by the maintenance exit. We waved to Alvin, the apartment's night manager, on our way out. He used to do the cleaning as well, but since he got hired at this apartment, his schedule allowed him to continue his education. I think he taught English in the Philippines. He still takes 10% whenever jobs happen in his building. Excuse me. Steve's red sign FRS was kept impressively clean and still had that faint smell. A faint smell of a brand new car. His phone automatically connected to the car's Bluetooth system, and he played an old Filipino rock song. was music I recognized from my childhood, even though much of it had become a blur. Sometimes I feel as if my life started when I was 12. Joy's pretty good with stitching. Does she do clothes? I have some things that I need hemmed. Maybe, I don't know. I think she used to be a nurse, though. I remember someone saying that, Steve said, without taking his eyes off the road. How did Lorna know about what the killer did? Oh, Ate Lorna used to be a detective in the Philippines, but she moved here with her son many years ago. He goes to drop in sometimes. Is he any good? He will be. He's only 15. I think he's going to be pretty tall. If Lorna was a detective, couldn't she be an assassin here? She seems pretty skilled. Shit, that's what I keep telling her. You should tell her that. She might listen to you. You could probably apply to be an assassin. You studied here. Henry's an assassin, and I used to see him at Langara. I don't even know if he's graduated. Oh, that dude? He's like half Norwegian, half Dutch, half Finnish, half British, and barely Filipino. He doesn't even speak the language. I'm not a killer, though, I admitted. Well, neither is Henry. I heard he's not very good. Other than my family and my girlfriend, Steve is basically my biggest fan. He was at commencement when I finished my English degree at Simon Fraser University and when I completed my publishing diploma at Langara College. I had a number of underground job offers when I graduated from SFU. A cousin at the Shangri-La said she could get me into hotels as an information broker, but I wasn't really stoked on the idea of collecting personal information and selling them to the highest bidder. The highest bidders of the underground. An old friend from high school aggressively tried to recruit me to spy for the Jehovah's Witnesses, but I'm not the most personable guy. Knocking on people's houses and smiling for the entirety of a 5-minute conversation about God made me uncomfortable. I did always know that the underground would field some possible opportunities for me, since I ticked off some of the boxes they liked. I was born in the Philippines, grew up and studied in Canada, was fluent in English and Tagalog. But my education also got me thinking about the other side. I kind of wanted to work in an office, maybe in the government, where I could secure great benefits and sustainable pension plan. It was Steve who finally succeeded in bringing me under. I met him about 8 years ago when he first moved to Canada. We both part-time at McDonald's and ended up playing in the same rec basketball league. Steve has always been great to me, probably because I helped him with English throughout his first year. He had built his own network when he got me in the janitorial agency. He knew Filipino underground spies at McDonald's, Church Chicken, the Winners. He knew information brokers at hotels and smugglers who worked at the airport and in cruise ships. He told me it was easy to remain anonymous as a janitor at the mall and that at least 60% of janitors in the greater Vancouver are Filipino. I could blend into the background at schools, universities, hospitals, malls, and other private and publicly owned establishments. Steve's estimate was right that at least half of those Filipino janitors are also cleaners for the underground. Those who used to be doctors and nurses in the Philippines have found some financial success and professional satisfaction as medical agents. He even argued that if all Filipinos working in the Canadian and American service industries were to take a day or two off, the underground would implode. I never voiced my disbelief. Crime is crime. It's going to happen no matter what. If people somehow stop killing each other, we would find a way to do something else, or the government would define new crimes. Yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Carlo. So one more, and then we'll go into a bit of a Q&A with all the authors. And I'm just warning you guys ahead of time because some people have been trickling in. I'm going to ask you to sort of give us a 1 or 2 sentence summary of your story and why you wrote it, okay? So that's the first question I'll ask you after Lily finishes her piece, okay? So I'm going to introduce Lily Chang. So Lily Chang is a writer, editor, and filmmaker based in Montreal, Quebec. She is a graduate of Concordia University's MA program in creative writing. Her work has appeared in Headlight Anthology, Frog Hollow's Press's The City series, Dark Helix Ezine, and elsewhere. She is a finalist for the 2018 CBC Nonfiction Prize and the Speculative Literature Foundation's 2018 Diverse Writers Grant. So thank you, Lily. So you can start reading anytime.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending. And thank you, Jaya, for hosting us. I'm going to read a flash fiction piece from the Dark Helix Ezine called Yes, They Dream of Electric Sheep. The beginning, when all is bright, holds the utmost possibility. Didi truly believes this. Just look at the room he's in. The reflective linoleum, the twinkling lights, the vibrant tapestries that tickle the top of his head. Everything appears new, feels new. It is like Didi has opened his eyes for the first time, and the world, ecstatic to have another admirer, flaunts its colors as shiny opportunities. Caught in a swirl of adrenaline, Didi drinks it all in. The pull of his teeth against a sticky sweetness, the warmth of the sun pulsing from the floorboards, the resilience of fibers. Every detail is a story, and the stories continue, room to room. He finds the present multiplying into parallel adventures, running their own timelines. His world, in these moments, is bigger than the house he's in. The extent of his possible futures crosses oceans, planets, even galaxies. In these imaginings, he moves of his own accord. He has more than one skill, one function. He believes his potential to be real and meaningful, almost human. The only obstacle is the limits of the corporeal. Even if Didi is moved from room to room, his body remains within the confines of the house, backwards, forwards, upstairs, downstairs. Before long, the mind cannot see past what the eyes see. Each corner starts to look like the one previous. Soon, all the stories are read. The walls he brushes past become cruel reminders of his boundaries. When he notices the shadow beneath all things, the dust of dreams forgotten, he knows that the beginning has passed. The middle is banal. The wait for the end is tiresome. He must repeat the actions he has made since the beginning, return to the grounds he finds no more joy in treading. He is full to bursting of disappointments and whirls of moldy ambitions. Failure is surprisingly filling. If he could only start again, unpack his regrets, hollow out his stomach, it would be good once more. But the end has to come before the beginning. No matter how dull and long the wait, the end arrives much too quickly for Didi. His movements stop without warning. His roar, the steadiness of which is noticed only when gone, is silenced. Before he detects the smiting motion, before his fear of the unfathomable could even begin to take shape, he is unplugged. All is dark. All is dark until crumbs have staked their colonial claims, until cat hairs have weaved the floors into wispy quilts, until clean freak parents have threatened to drop by for a visit. Didi opens his eyes. The beginning, when all is bright, holds the utmost possibility. That's it. It's a short piece.
Well, thank you very much. So Vincent, Melissa, and Carl, do you want to turn on your camera? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your pieces. Like, I know people are trickling in halfway, so maybe Vincent, do you want to talk a little bit about your story and what inspired it?
Okay, so my story is called Not All Bears Drink Mead, and it appeared in the Immersion anthology of speculative fiction, love, and science fiction. You see
Yeah, it's
that
a
right?
really long title. I forget it half the time.
So yeah, it is an offshoot of another of one nonfiction story that I wrote that it eventually turned into a chapter in my novella, The Seven Muses of Harry Salcedo. The entire story was inspired by a bunch of us joining a friend who's a bit of a gun nut and going over to the mountains shooting some rifles because he's a gun supervisor. I've never shot a gun before, so for Americans in the audience, yeah, like we're Canadians, so but guns don't exist here. So yeah, so I shot a rifle for the first time, and I couldn't believe the amount of like the recoil, like everything that I imagined. It's a lot worse than I thought. I didn't like it. And then a bear showed up, so I'm just like, okay, there's a bear. What am I gonna do? But the bear was more curious rather than aggressive or anything. Just loved to watch us. So from there, I wrote it as a nonfiction piece, and eventually became a chapter in my book regarding a bunch of people shooting guns, and then mostly in my main character's head, talking about how dangerous, how much power he has, all that type of stuff. And after a while, I started writing from the point of view of the bear, and then the bear eventually turned into a human being, and eventually I framed it in such a way that the whole thing could be an LSD trip, but also could be taken as a speculative fiction piece. So to the people that just came in, what I read was the point of view of the bear and how he views everything else. So basically the story, if I sum it up in a sentence, not all bears drink mead. A con man who poses as a Craigslist shaman to make a quick buck ends up taking a client who actually says who he says he is, an actual skin changer who turns into a bear. Yeah. It's a lot more introspective than anything, really. It's a stream of consciousness, slipstream type of thing. That's what I like to write.
Oh, cool. How about Melissa?
Hi, everybody. One of my friends did come by and she was quite confused because she missed the beginning of my story. So it's a good idea to explain. So in my case, there was a bookstore that was commissioning an anthology and was paying 10 cents a word. And I was like, okay, great. I got to write a story about that. And when I started researching bookstores, I found out that they were in a lot of trouble. Exactly what I said in the story, that Barnes and Noble and and here would be Chapters Indigo would be buying up all the books and getting these huge discounts. And then so then the small bookstores couldn't compete on price. And then, it's hard to just have people come through loyalty and stuff. So I was like, wow, that's really great. And then for some reason I thought of, well, what if the bookstore was going to solve this problem instead of a human financial wizard, but like an actual bookstore protagonist. And I decided that it would be like a 3 wishes and it would have to make it right in 3 wishes. And I was just telling my friend also that during my medical school residency, and residency, I wrote a lot of fantasy because I just needed to get away from people's problems all the time. So it was a really great escape. And I have to say, actually, this is a popular story for me. I've sold it 3 times. This was in Futuristic Canada with Dark Helix, and also sold to Weird Tales in the US and Andromeda Space and Flight magazine in Australia. So people around the world enjoy bookstores from Montreal.
Very cool. Carlo, I think yours was probably the most violent tonight.
That was my goal. That was all I wanted to do. Yeah, so this story is Janitors is inspired by a couple of things. I wrote this in, I think, a couple of years ago, and when I was in university, I worked at the student newspaper, and I had written a story about the wage issue that the janitors had there with their employers. And so that was the first information. The janitors there, at the time, I don't know now, but they were mostly Filipino, like 85, maybe 90% of them were. And so there's a stat, I mentioned it in the reading earlier, there's mentioned that 60% of janitors in the Greater Vancouver area are Filipino. And that was the true stat I got at the time in 2017, I think, of that story, that research. So that's partly inspired the story. And then the second part was a couple of years after that story, I was, I graduated, I left the newspaper, I was unemployed, and I was struggling to find a job for a few months, several months. And so I kind of played off the stereotype that we have that many Filipinos are janitors, and that and the jokes that people might say about that. So I combined those 2 worlds, and also feelings about being unemployed and struggling. So that inspired the story. I remember I actually started a story because I was at a McDonald's. I was applying a bunch of jobs on Glassdoor. Not the best website to use for that, but yeah, I remember writing it on the side of a McDonald's, complaining about Glassdoor, having to write a review because I couldn't find job openings. So yeah.
We have a question for you from Therese. Love your story. Do you have any more in the works that explores the Filipino culture, and tell us a little bit?
Oh.
So that's for you specifically, Carlo.
Yeah, I think so. I think I've been, I guess my last submission or story that I finished was last fall, and since then I kind of been slow on the short story side. But I've, for some reason, dabbled with poetry. I think Vincent advised it might be a good idea to switch gears a couple months ago to me. So I did that, and then instinctively, I think the first 3 or 4 that I started drafting were, a bit maybe inspired by Filipino identity, Filipino Canadian identity, and maybe even some racism, and not inspired by racism, but yeah. So yeah, I would say yes. And I think that once I get the momentum on another short story, hopefully in the next coming months, there'll certainly be some elements of the Filipino identity on there.
Cool. So, Lily, so tell us a little bit about your story and why you wrote it.
So I think I wrote the story for the Dark Helix Ezine. I think the theme was New Year. So I was thinking about New Year's and I was imagining that every time I turned on my vacuum, so it's a vacuum cleaner, they experienced the world as a newborn, and that every time I turned it off, it was sort of the end of their life. So I was thinking about that cycle where you're reduced to one function, and for me that's kind of related to how I feel every morning when it's full of possibility, and then by sunset I feel like I haven't done anything, and that cycle continues. So it's sort of feeding into that need to always feel productive, always be productive. Yeah, and that's why I wrote that story.
Cool. So we're all under a pandemic right now. So has COVID sort of affected your writing? And do you have any horrible stories you want to tell? Or anything like that? Um, it doesn't matter who goes first.
Yeah, I think so. I find that for me, creative writing, since I'm fairly new, again, I come from a journalistic background, and I probably started creative writing 4 years ago now, or almost 4 years ago now. And I've found that I really like to have at least a change of space when I'm writing. Even when I'm outlining or brainstorming, I don't always want to be, working at the desk in the kitchen or in the bedroom or on the same couch. Sometimes I wish that there was a different environment around me, or like, a semblance of randomness. And I think what COVID took away is random encounters or random, situations that you might find yourself in, since we're all kind of bogged down into like the same monotony of every day. It's like a very, very long weekend. Like every day is a weekend, it never ends. So it's kind of weird like that. So I think that loss of, I guess, space and just repetition of your day to day has kind of slowed down my writing a little bit.
Melissa?
Yeah, so I had mentioned at the beginning that I was an emergency physician, but I had pulled back from medicine so I could write. But with a pandemic, you can't pull back. So I felt like I had to jump in person, but also to advocate for physicians and nurses and other frontline healthcare workers, because we didn't know if we were going to have enough PPE. I hope you guys remember a year ago, like it was coming, we didn't have enough. And that was a panic because people were dying. Like it was over 100 doctors in Italy who died. They were treating people with no gloves. They had run out of gloves. Like it was crazy. So I didn't do creative writing. I was just trying to figure out all the medical knowledge that we knew, which was, just people posting just what they had learned, at their hospital with the patients, and people just passing it from person to person. And there is a COVID physician group and that sort of thing. So we're just passing things back and forth, trying to figure out what we're going to do. And also thinking ahead I was asking tough questions like, what happens if we run out of beds? What happens if we run out of oxygen? Which people didn't want to answer, basically. So I also wrote a petition, by the way. I spearheaded a petition and it got over 200,000 signatures to advocate for PPE and effective treatment and that sort of thing, which was great. I was on the news a lot. I was actually on CBC, the National, and other radio and TV programs. So which was good and important work, but did not mean any sort of creative writing. So I easily lost a month of my life, probably more. And it wasn't until later that I realized that, for example, the other thing I did was my husband and I decided to keep our kids home. He's an engineer and he works from home now, so he could watch them. But his idea of watching them is like, he just makes sure that they're online and then he walks away. So, you know, like, and it didn't matter in the spring because they weren't really doing work, but now they're trying to have them do work. And so I'm trying to work, watch them, make sure that they're participating, etc. And I also have a desktop computer downstairs where I do most of my writing. And so to have, if 1 to 2 teachers are talking and then my kids are talking, and it's impossible to create. So even though I'm lucky in some ways that I live in a rural area, so I can still take walks, like there are very few people, it was still a really tough time for everybody, even if you didn't have to deal with people getting sick and dying. So I really feel for everyone. And I just want to say that a lot of my writer friends stopped writing. They just felt like, what's the point? So if you felt that way, don't worry, it's normal. I think most people are kind of back to it, but it is, you know, a pandemic is not a normal time. You just have to kind of run through it.
Yeah, I concur with you with the children sort of destroying the creative dream once in a while. But anyhow, hopefully as they grow older, they'll leave us alone and then, you know, you can start writing more. About Lily?
I think it increased all my fears and anxieties, which reduced the desire, energy to write. And then, but I think also staying at home, like Carlos was saying, like with the fewer distractions, it also I felt like it led to more internal work and more reflection. So in a way, I think I had more time to write and more discipline for meeting deadlines. So it's like up and down, yeah. Mm-hmm.
How about you, Vincent? How are you doing writing-wise?
So I treated the COVID pandemic as another job, so like a third job, to just try to get used to it. The first few months, it's a lot of reacting, like holding out to see what's going to happen next. Can we go out this month? Yeah, the spring was terrible. It's just watching a lot of TV, like just waiting, a lot of waiting. So when summer came around, there's an itch in the back that says like you just gotta get something done, just write something. And with that, I started working on the manuscript that I had left behind from winter, and as well as taking a look at all of my backlog. And yeah, like Carla said earlier, that I told him to change gears and take up poetry, because one thing that I've been doing was I'm taking a lot of leftover pieces, leftover works, and trying to discern something from them. And then one thing that I've noticed is like a few paragraphs can become postcard stories. So I started working on a lot of poetry and that type of thing, as well as working on the manuscript that I've left behind, which is quite difficult because the motivation isn't there. Everybody that I've looked to read my work before, we're all predisposed into doing their things. So you just try to find something, find something to hold on to, working on little projects, and I think that as Lily said, that internal work is definitely part of it. Since one thing that I notice about my writing, it's like growing as a human being. You're the sum of all your decisions, and same thing with your writing. And all that internal work can lead to something better in the future. Not right now, but allow yourself some kindness, and hopefully that new manuscript, that new poetry book, that new chapbook will come about in the future.
Okay, cool. So let's see, we have 14 minutes left. If anyone wants to ask any questions, they could put in the chat box. But meanwhile, I'll ask you to describe, so what's the latest thing you guys are working on, and where can we find you on the internet and in the world? Melissa, you want to go first?
Oh, I did manage to release a book during the pandemic, which is called Scorpion Scheme, which is one of my medical thrillers. And Hope-C goes to Egypt and finds a man with a nail through his skull who might hold a key to buried gold. So that was, I deliberately wrote a book that was light, like lighter than my usual fare. And oh, I got a thumbs up, thanks. And I'm now trying to work on the 9th book in the series. And again, I want to keep it light. And what I decided to do for that was look into the prohibition and speakeasies and that sort of things, which is not necessarily a fun subject, but still involves parties. So that was my desire. And as I mentioned, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter and my website. I do have some short stories that are coming out soon, including in speculative fiction, if that's more your game. So I have a book that was accepted to the Food of My People anthology, which is speculative fiction with food, also one of my big passions. And Humans and Hot Dogs will be reprinted in Amazing Stories and Speculative North anthology. And oh, I rewrote The Three Bears, and that's going to appear in a gay anthology, which is my first LGBTQ anthology. Oh, and one more. I have a story about a stripper that's coming out in Artificial Divide, which is a collection of stories about people who have limited eyesight. So there you go.
Oh my God, Melissa, you're like, oh, I haven't done anything because of COVID. And you're like, are you really a robot or something? Like,
Those are all things that I had before, that I'd written before. I just submitted them. That's all.
okay,
Also,
okay.
also a physician, just say.
Yeah, I know. All right. How about Carlo? What are you working on now, and where can we find you?
I most recently worked on a submission to CBC short story. That was a different story because that was not about race at all. I submitted that. Hopefully, I think in a couple weeks or maybe another month, we'll hear back. Other than that, as I mentioned earlier, I've been mostly working on poems. I might have 2 that I can probably submit soon that I might be kind of happy with. And I'm not so much on social media. I have a not very active Twitter account. It's @_ Carlo Javier. But you can't really find me anywhere else. But you can find me on the Insight Timer meditation app. You can add me on and message me on. So yeah, not as much writing for me. I'm not a physician either.
Oh my God, this is gonna be an ongoing thing.
Maybe later.
How about Lily? What are you working on?
I'm working on a play that's funded by the Canada Council for the Arts Grant, and it's a family dramedy set in Taiwan, and it's about grief and Buddhist beliefs about the afterlife. I've been working on that, but I also have another project that I'm planning and working on, which is going to be a memoir collection. It's going to explore the effects of systemic violence on a woman's experience of her body. And yeah, that's what I'm working on.
So Carlo, we have a question about Inside Time. Like, what is Inside Time?
Oh, it's a meditation app.
Oh, and then you can connect with friends to meditate. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. All right. How about Vincent? What are you doing? Are you working on your next CBC like fiction prize story?
Well, I haven't heard from them, so. So I'm working on that manuscript that will never get written. So it's a group of short stories, 9 of them, an interconnected bunch about a smuggler who, from the point of view of his victims, who either have a positive or negative experience, but he's just going around being this supernatural force towards different people, spanning 3 different cities. I think I'm on my 5th draft, and I don't know where I'm going with it. I tried to do it in second person, but it didn't work. So backtracking on that one. Some of my postcard stories came up in Social Distancer magazine, the issue 3. I think 2 of them came in. I also am a video game journalist for now. I write at onemore-game.ph, and I think that's the bulk of my writing. I come out with like 2-3 articles every day, and yeah, it's highly opinionated. So watch out. It's a warning. I hate English double. Just one thing.
Oh, Melissa has a question.
Oh, I actually had forgotten to say stuff. I'm so sorry. I know you guys are sick of hearing from me. But I am in the March-April issue of Alfred Hitchcock's mystery magazine with a poker crime story. And Lily's play stuff reminded me that I have a bunch of play stuff. So the 3rd Hope C book, Terminally Ill, it was supposed to be an immersive play last year and then was pushed to this year. And now it's just going to be a workshop, but we're still doing it in June. And I'm part of the Asian Exploitation Improv Troupe, which is based in Toronto. And we are trying to build up a show that's built on the Brady Bunch, but instead it's like the Bautza Bunch. So it's like a, mom and a dad, and they each have 3 kids and the blended families. So that's another thing. And I was going to say something else. Now I forget. Oh yeah, I was supposed to do the Winnipeg Fringe Festival because I also have a fringe show, but we don't know what's happening with social distancing and everything like that. So we'll see what happens. But so I just want to put all that stuff into, even though people are like, who the hell is she?
Is writing for plays very different from writing your fiction? Like it's like a lot more dialogue? Like
Yeah.
Do you find writing a lot more?
I'm sure Lily would speak
challenging?
about this as well. For sure, more dialogue, and you have to show instead of telling. But for my Fringe show, I did cheat, and I turned one of my book of essays into the Fringe play, so I didn't have to do it, and it was all storytelling. So it's not quite the same thing.
Okay, cool. So let's see, it's like 8:54. I think we're probably gonna wrap this up. So I'd like to thank everyone for volunteering and reading your wonderful stories and sharing your experiences with us. And for people in the audience, the SMOL press fair is still going on. There's a lot of other free events too. Like there's a lot of readings going on, and their website is at smolfair.com, smolfair.com. I should put it in the chat box. And I am experimenting with King Sumo raffles, so that's why I'm giving stuff out. I was giving out some books yesterday, and but my friend told me, I did it wrong because I'm supposed to give away Amazon gift cards because no one wants books, and I was like, okay, fine. So so it's a bundle package with books and gift cards, so people can choose what they want if they don't, like the books or whatnot. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming. I mean, there's a lot of small presses that are sort of doing these events, and yeah, it's very interesting to meet other people and other authors, and there's a lot of stuff going on. So thank you very much for taking the time out. We really appreciate it. So, all right, I'll give you a few minutes back of your life because I hear my son crying and I have to go. So, all right. Okay, have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.